from, and I say print media and broadcast media at the time, of course, that would have been newspapers primarily and radios, from the New York Times on down, have given us a complete nonsense, pseudoscience, pompous statements from unnamed authorities, explaining away, insulting rationales, but then we get somebody, say, like a Donald Kehoe. Kehoe was a highly respected and decorated World War II Marine fighter pilot who gave us several of the early classics of UFO studies, UFOs from outer space, flying saucers from outer space, as the term was at the time. Flying saucers are real. These books, although again that phrase, flying saucer, is hooked up in many minds and the popular imagination with phrases like little green men. I think in part both phrases were put forward because they sound loopy. Flying saucers, an attempt to describe the round shape of some of them. Little green men for no special reason, just because it sounds kind of goofy. I am not aware of a single report of a green other intelligence or being that has ever come in.
Good point.
Yeah. And it's funny, again, going through some of the documents I was today, I came upon a letter from 1967 written by, I believe, the Speaker of the House at the time, a gentleman named Lyndon Baines Johnson, directly to Major Kehoe, thanking him, and not in the way of putting him off, like let's get rid of this loopy character, but a respectful thank you for reports that he was forwarding to members of Congress, and Johnson's very serious attitude and respect for Mr. Kehoe, at the time a civilian, of course. I think there have been periods as well where we've gotten, kind of trendy or goofier speakers who know, or writers who will explain to us what is really going on. How do they know what's going on? Well, they're either not at liberty to tell us, or it's information that they were chosen to know by the beings themselves, or. When somebody, comes up to me at a conference and may begin by saying, thank you for your talk, I found it very interesting, but you are aware, of course, that there are 46 civilizations visiting the Earth. They've been coming for 482,000 years. These ones are from here, these ones are from here, these are the craft they drive, this is what they eat, these are the reasons for being here. I have an immediate problem with that. Again, who am I to say that they're not right? But I guess I kind of function on a lower vibration than they do, or I'm not privy to their information sources. So I think right now, to bring it up to date, we are aware, we in the field, of a very specific use for the word disclosure. A very double-edged sword as far as I'm concerned, because it's used very responsibly and as a name of a movement, and also with a certain amount of manipulation, I think, to create a whole other group of believers. But in fact, there is a fledgling movement, and it is worldwide, for citizens to educate each other about the seriousness of this subject, and to do what they can to encourage their governments or their militaries, what have you, to put forward the information or some of the information that they do have. And in some cases, it has been successful, at least in a limited degree, although this country has never willingly declassified a UFO document unless it's been in the normal course of attrition, where every few years documents are reviewed, or at least they used to be, and maybe their classification has been lowered, and after 12 years or so they may be declassified. That doesn't mean they're announced. It means they're quietly filed away in the National Archives or what have you. But there are many countries in the world that have declassified thousands of pages of UFO documents, and not necessarily little third world countries. We're talking about England, France, Belgium, Denmark, Spain, a number of South American countries, Asian countries. We are recalcitrant. We sit on our stuff, and we do not let any of it out. Whether or not this is simply a kind of smart way to get the pressure off, your government or military, or good public relations, I don't care. I think it's a first step. And although none of the papers that I've seen or understand in translation are the smoking gun, we've seen a lot of interesting smoke, and I think it would see this country do some declassifying as well and put it out there on, say, a Department of Defense website. So it's a tough question to answer. I think we've had some sterling moments and some kind of goofy ones. The best people in the field hold themselves to a high standard. They always have. The loopier ones are a little, freer and looser with their modus operandi or what they consider evidence or supporting facts. And, until we reach a point where we have some kind of critical mass where we know it's real because of, landings here and there that are undeniable, or a WikiLeaks type leak, and I do worry about Julian Assange, and I think governments are concerned in part. I would love to see him vaporized, fall into the deepest hole on the planet, because WikiLeaks has already proved a very powerful facility for getting information out that is embarrassing to the powers that be, or whether or not there is some kind of huge worldwide movement. I think that's a little naive at this point. I would like to see something like that, but I'm not holding my breath.
That is a tremendous analysis. I personally feel like the way that we are going to go forward is by the course of time. In other words, we probably won't convince the secret keepers to give up their secrets. What will happen is that eventually there will be so many more of us than there are of them.
Yeah.
I think that the saddest part of all of this, to me, is that when I meet young people and you raise the issue of, well, is our government keeping secrets about UFOs? They basically say something like, well, duh, everybody knows that. And they're so cynical about any possibility that our officials would ever be open and honest with them. And UFOs are just one more subject that they don't trust the government about.
Yes, you're right. This is particularly, in a dispassionate way, I find it fascinating. People who absolutely 180 degrees opposite each other in terms of their political beliefs are of one mind that we are being lied to by officialdom on any number of subjects. And UFOs is one of the most common functioning ones that, the left and the right agree on.
I can't help but feel, and I guess this sort of dovetails into something that I've seen happening in the UFO field, and it alarms me, and this is an organizational threat. And by threat, what I mean, I call it corporatism. I'm very worried that we will see the same kind of self-centered, protect the people at the top at all costs, avoid civil liability, don't be caught taking a position on anything, that kind of strategy being employed by an organization that should be out in front and maybe taking a few risks, or maybe being able to say, I made a mistake, or maybe we're not right about that. I don't think that that shouldn't be impossible for an organization.
Well, I think that may be one of the most important things that we touch upon tonight, James, and I'm so glad you brought it up. UFOs aside for a moment, we are now increasingly living at a time where this is the norm. Protect the most powerful, continue to encourage low low awareness, low intelligence in the masses, treat everything almost like a sports event, but hold sacrosanct above all else your commitment to power. And power itself is the goal of many people. I don't think we've been at a worse point in our civil governance since you and I have been alive as what we're seeing right now in the halls of the Senate and the House of Representatives. I have so little respect for such a high percentage of people that are holding office right now, and I love this country. I disagree with a tremendous number of things that, have been done in the name of it, but I think that's the nature of democracy in part. Right now, just here we are on, a little independent internet broadcast venue, but we can talk about the tremendous abuses of power that Murdoch, father and son, have been perpetrating on the American public and on the British public. And it is now blowing up big time in the United Kingdom. Whether or not it will blow back here to Fox or the Wall Street Journal or the New York Post or other holdings of the Murdoch empire, I don't know. But these people are more protected than God right now on a certain level, and I doubt that, they're going to feel the wrath of the legal system the same way that, on Wall Street you can steal $1 billion from somebody and, get your license suspended. But, if you rob a convenience store, you're going to go to jail for 10 years. We live in a very unjust reality right now with a certain amount of mythology and storybook kind of ideas trying to convince us otherwise. But we are in a real crisis situation right now in our democracy, and I am afraid it's either is already a corporatocracy, and here we are with as far as I'm concerned, an incredibly corrupt Supreme Court that has given corporations the rights of individuals, although you can't tax an organization, a corporation, the same way that you would tax an individual. And the cards are leaning more and more against the middle class and working people, and those with power are accumulating more power and living in their gated communities and sitting on their gold and watching us become a nation of, I think they would like to see serfs and a very tiny ruling elite. And back to the subject of UFOs, this is a subject where knowledge is power. And again, Stanton Friedman has raised this point originally for years now, the idea being that if you are a government, you're not looking forward to getting hold of the truth about UFOs or, more important, actual technology for the advancement of your people. It's all about military. It's all about more powerful weapons, and whomever controls this technology on Earth wins the game over. So the areas and the opportunities for abuse or motives for misleading we the people in whatever country, in whatever culture, on the true nature of what we are confronting here is very tempting and very powerful, and certainly is part of the confusion, the deception, the lies, and the ridicule.
Indeed, well said. I've been told that if you're willing to go a bit further, we've been granted an extra 15 minutes. Would you care to continue?
I'm going to have to ask double the salary I was going to get.
Oh, okay.
Well, there we go then. All right. You heard that, folks. I'm getting twice what I was going to get for being on the show.
I know.
Excellent news.
There you go. Well,
okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
If the government has been warned by the extraterrestrials that any disclosure would be followed by terrible retribution, then wouldn't the UFO cover-up be a noble thing or a positive thing for the government to do?
The short answer to that question is yes.
Yes, I agree. But I somehow doubt that that's what's occurring.
I do too.
And there are a bunch of reasons why.
Yeah, but you know what? If indeed you and I are wrong, and if that is a reality, and I don't think it is, you don't think it is, but I respect the fact that we may not be all-knowing, then that is a very good question, and that is the only answer we can give.
That's very true. And I've always, I guess my question would be, I wonder what would happen if I was, one day cornered by somebody in power who pulled me off to one side and said, okay, you've been talking about UFOs forever and alleging a government cover-up, and we're going to tell you right now, yes, there is a cover-up, and the knowledge is really startling. But here's the deal. We will tell you what we know, but you can never tell anyone else. How would you choose?
Occasionally that question in variation has played through my thinking, and I think anyone else that has gotten as deeply involved in this subject as we have. First, for those of us that have strayed so deeply into this territory that we can now look back at decades and say, fascinating work, always thought-provoking, always intriguing. I've met some wonderful people, some memorable people who are not people I'd want to get stuck in an elevator with. Has let me travel a little bit. But I think one thing we can say for sure about ufology is it is not a really swift career decision. And as somebody who laughingly makes most of their living in this area, take it from me, keep your day job and do this as an avocation, or do it once you are independently, set. I'm damned if I know, James. I've actually, there's a part of me that says I'm dedicated to the truth. I would never sell out. I'm power to the people and all the similar kind of 60s platitudes. And another part of me that says, we're all here for a little while. If I had an opportunity to be brought in as an insider and, not even do damage to the field, but simply and quietly, move off to other things. In my case, I've got a lot of other interests. I'm a photographer, I'm an art collector, I'm a passionate traveler, I'm an amateur historian. I like people. I have plenty of things to keep me busy, or anything that would act as a cover story, in a case like this, and then, be brought down in some kind of classified way to the Beltway area or, some remote military facility and go through all these doors and elevators and push levers and have iris scans and all that cool stuff and walk into the room where, there's the machine and cryogenically suspended bodies. It's tempting. I don't know.
I don't know. It would be a really hard one.
Yeah, I think so. We're only human. I will go on record as saying I have not been asked. And I also will go on record as saying I know one extremely, extremely pompous and fairly well-known person in the field who maintains that he has been, but turned it down because indeed he is a man of the people and would rather go down shooting his pistols, which he's very good with, and, power to the people for sure. And I think he is full of stuffed jelly beans myself.
And that's entirely always a possibility. I don't even know to whom you're referring, but I've probably met similar people. I've met similar people.
Yeah.
So one of the questions that came back when we were discussing that one scenario about maybe this is being kept secret for a reason that relates to the welfare of the human race. Do you have any reasons why you doubt that that's the explanation?
Say the question again, James.
Okay, if the government had been warned by the ETs that any disclosure would be followed by terrible retribution, then wouldn't the cover-up be a positive thing for the government to do?
Absolutely. It would be their only viable decision in terms of protecting the safety of their people, of course.
Well, then I guess the question that follows up is, okay, why is it that we both express doubt about that being the explanation for what's going on?
Yeah. Well, number one, based on decades of observation, of casework, of taking case histories, of being privy to certain extraordinary physical evidences. And I'm not speaking in these secret-keeping terms. You can read all about it and Left at East Gate. I dismiss the premise as untenable because I don't think they really care whether or not, our government were to spill the beans about it, like, that's going to be a problem for them on some level. Why would that be the case? They can, run circles around us. Their technology seems to dwarf anything that we're even close to having. They seem, and again, I can only say this is based on many years of case history and analysis, and much of it working as the assistant to Bud Hopkins, and being privy to hundreds of cases, sitting in on many interviews, hypnotic regressions, presentations of physical evidences, supporting materials from mental and medical health professionals, that, there's no reason. I'm just a pawn in the game here. I don't see the giant big picture. I can make as many educated guesses, probably more than many people, but I don't know the answers. I just don't get why they would fear or not want an awareness of them to be, why they would be so wired up about, if you tell, we're going to wipe you out or we're going to do something terrible. I would need somebody to present a case to me as to why they might feel that way. I just don't get that it really matters to them that much. If we want to talk about it or go public, fine. But I think we know that even after all these years, as pointed to in Brookings Institute studies, Air Force studies, CIA studies, that fear of panic, that would all by itself, whether or not it comes to pass, that in itself is a reason why we wouldn't want to tell us, but not why they wouldn't want us to tell ourselves.
I think that is an excellent point. And of course, there are some historical events that apparently would bear that out. One comes to mind, of course, is the Orson Welles broadcast on War of the Worlds. And
yes.
Then I think there is also the Phoenix Lights from March of 1997, and I believe that one of Governor Symington's concerns was that the emergency communications channels were flooded with people who were concerned about what was flying overhead.
Well, bravo. We're talking here about the Phoenix Light case a dozen or so years ago, where a huge honkin' triangular-shaped thing flew over Phoenix, and it was massive. We're stuck with that. It is the way it is. Symington was the governor at the time. That was a rational concern of his, and I would say, too, based on his mea culpa 10 years later, when he said, not only was I aware that this was real when I was governor, and belittling it in a absolutely humiliating, enraging for somebody like you or I, insult to the thousands of eyewitnesses to this thing by having one of his assistants come out during the press conference in an alien head, ha ha ha. He was also covering his own behind. He was an eyewitness himself. And right there we see the power of fear of ridicule. But you bring up a very important reason as well, and never underestimate that old Cunard, the War of the Worlds broadcast. For those three people listening that are not aware of this, we're talking about Halloween Eve, 1938. Orson Welles, Mercury Theater of the Air, did an Americanized treatment, collapsed into half an hour or so, the weeks of the actual story of the H.G. Wells British story published in '99 about an invasion from Mars, there was a certain amount of panic, and it was studied very carefully after the fact. For anybody that's interested in some very dry but scholarly and fascinating reading on this, get yourself a used copy of The Invasion from Mars, a study in the mass psychology of panic. I may be off a word there. It's written by a Princeton scholar named Hadley Cantrell, Cantrill, and it's a fascinating study of this broadcast, which was so obviously a broadcast. It was, as they said, their way of saying boo to the listening audience. But it was so well acted, and even though weeks collapsed into half an hour with commercial interruptions, people ignored the commercials, tied up phone lines all over America. There were cases of people heading for the hills and getting out their weapons, and in New York City, people running to the Hudson River to see New Jersey in flames. There were a certain amount of coronaries and breakdowns, etc. So, yes, this study is cited repeatedly. I think it is a bit overblown, but never underestimate the power of panic.
That's true, because individual people may react rationally, but I know from personal experience that mobs do not.
Indeed. Indeed. Yeah, and I think it's something we see in law enforcement, we see it in political history, we see it in human affairs when minds are a bit ragged or under stress, or in a good Twilight Zone episode, for goodness sakes. And I cite the Twilight Zone specifically because they did, under Rod Serling's wonderful guidance in the early 60s, so much with so little. Some of their best episodes were shot on, like a suburban street with a bunch of actors, with maybe a $5 special effect, and the power of the imagination, giving us a very important lesson in getting scared for reasons that have to do with the paranormal or fear of the unknown.
The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, I think.
I rewatched that one a couple of weeks ago during their marathon on the 4th of July. That was great.
It's hard not to love it.
Yeah, and of course, To Serve Man, one of our favorites.
Yes.
It's a cookbook.
Exactly. Exactly.
And we're talking here about one of the great classics where the actor playing the alien went on to great fame in the James Bond movie as Jaws.
Of course, I'd never thought of that, but that is true. I think we have about 5 more minutes, so if you have any concluding thoughts, this is probably the time, or any announcements that you would like to make.
Well, again, for all of my fans in Central Greece, I'll look forward to seeing you next week at the Orgonomic Conference on the Life and Work of Wilhelm Reich, where I'll be giving 2 papers with PowerPoint presentations. I do feel, James, though, that as good friends and colleagues in this work, and that you are now in a position of being a radio host, doing a show like this for me is always an opportunity to reach new listeners, new readers, folks who I hope will at least keep some of the thoughts that we give them in our minds and maybe begin to educate themselves. But I'd like to come back as a guest and do this every once in a while, have an opening, and basically just have this ongoing conversation, pick up where we left off. If there's, some compelling case material that's going on, and encourage as many calls and emails as possible. And thank you all for your good questions tonight, particularly good questions. I also want to wish you all the best with this wonderful opportunity that you have to reach people not just all over the Northwest where you're located in beautiful Washington State, or all over America, but all over the world through this remarkable technology that is now available to us.
I think that that's one of the reasons why I hold you in such high regard, because we have to approach this subject with intellectual integrity and with as much compassion as we can muster in the face of this mystery, and also towards each other. We've somehow got to reach out to each other.
Well, thank you. You know, you may have just made the most important point of the evening as far as I'm concerned, James, and it's this. Behind the sarcasm, behind the debunking, behind the belittling of the subject lies a certain amount of confusion, fear of the unknown, and a desire to not have this happening or the implications of it as a possibility. I'm happy in my little life with the parameters set as they are. And unless somebody is vicious in terms of their attacks, I really try to remember that behind their bravado or, well, you know, you're a grown-up and you're a ufologist. Well, how charming, isn't that interesting? You know, you pathetic lost person. That there is almost total ignorance of the subject and the tremendous amount of scholarship and actual evidences and documentations that have more than convinced people like you and I that we are involved in important work here. And a little compassion goes a long way, as does patience, as does the desire to take it on the chin every once in a while, have a good separate self-deprecating sense of humor, and roll with the punches while you try to bring folks some information on this subject that maybe will make them a little more courageous to think a little far beyond the box that they're locked in.
Well, with that, Peter, I want to thank you sincerely for this opportunity once again. I wish we were face-to-face doing this, and perhaps one day we will be.
I hope so, James. Right now, we're 3,000 miles apart, straddling different parts of the United States, just outside of Ithaca, New York, beautiful Washington State. I think of you like a brother and a friend. Please send my best wishes to your better half there. Well, other half, I'll say. And keep fighting the good fight. And let's speak again the next few weeks and figure out when we can pick this up again and continue.
Absolutely, Peter. I just wish you safe journey. And with that, I want to announce this brings us to the end of this Inception Radio Network broadcast. I am James Clarkson, your host. On behalf of EPIC, Extraordinary Phenomena Investigations Council, I need to announce that Chase Kletsky, Director of Investigations, will be the next presenter on EPIC Voyages, and her guest will be Ken Gerard. So at this time, I thank all of you for listening and continue your exploration and your asking of the important questions. Good night.
Thank you for being with us tonight. Please join us again next Monday evening for Extraordinary Phenomena Investigations Council's EPIC Voyages. I'm Roger Peacock for EPIC. Until next time.